Responses engine 5, engine 3, engine 1, ladder 3, ladder 2, rescue 1. We've got smoke showing. Division 1, you're on location, box 23, reporting smoke show on 727.
Welcome to JobTlks podcast. Our goal is to facilitate knowledge sharing. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests on the show belong solely to the people expressing them. We do not represent the departments, cities, or towns we work for. All right, welcome everybody back for another episode of JobTlks. Thanks for being here. Today is a pretty, we say special episode quite a bit, but today is a pretty special episode. We have retired Deputy Chief Joe Marchetti here, who works with Detect Together, which I imagine some departments have seen. I know that he came through our department, not you specifically, but Detect Together came through our department a couple months ago and did a really good presentation. Not something that we like to have to talk about, but something we definitely need to talk about is the prevalence of cancer in the fire service. So before we get started, if you want to introduce yourself and give a little bio.
Well, Joe Marchetti. I just recently retired from the Brockton Fire Department. I was on the fire department for 25 years in Brockton, retired as a deputy chief. Now, in my retirement, I'm looking to still help the fire service by raising cancer awareness, dealing with the cancer problem in the fire service.
Yeah, so thanks for being here. We really appreciate it.
No, it's very important.
Yeah. So before we get into like the presentation from Detect Together with Joe, kind of want to dig into your career a little bit. So, how did you get your start? Where did you find yourself headed towards the fire service?
I was working in private EMS, like a lot of us. Yeah. You talk to the firefighters that got hired in the 80s and 90s. Most of us started in private EMS.
Right.
And I loved being a paramedic at the time. Really didn't see myself doing anything else. And then I got bitten by the private company employee at will stuff. Saw
as we all do.
Guys that were doing the same, very similar job to me, that enjoyed union benefits and the benefits of public employees and job security. Mm-hmm. So I did it. What happened was I got passed up for a promotion.
Right.
And said, you know what, I'm going to take the fire test.
Right.
And just to have another open door. I already had 2 kids. We were married, just bought a house.
Right.
And we used to get cards in the mail back then. It wasn't emails or anything. Yeah. And I had interviews lined up in Stoughton, Franklin, and Falmouth, I believe. Mm-hmm. Because I was being a paramedic.
Desirable for those?
Yeah, well, that's what they could do, the waiver. They could pass over people to hire paramedics.
Yeah. Right.
And then I got a card from Brockton, which is where I grew up and where I lived. But they don't hire paramedics. There's no preference for paramedics. So I kind of thought that would be the last place I got hired.
Yeah.
So I called a friend who you guys have had on the show, is Brian Nardelli. He's now the chief in Brockton. Yeah. He got on, I think, 6 months before this. And I said, hey, I know you just got on in Brockton. What do you think? I have these other prospects lined up. And he says, you're an idiot if you don't take the Brockton job.
Yeah.
So, okay. And that was it. So
the rest is history.
I canceled the other interviews and got on in Brockton.
Awesome. That's awesome.
He had a sort of similar beginning story too, right?
Yeah.
Working in EMS.
We both worked in private ambulance.
Yeah.
So, I knew that was the guy I wanted to call.
Right.
We had similar experience. He didn't have the family at the time like I did.
Right.
And my wife's family are Boston firefighters. So the transition was easy. My wife grew up in a family of firefighters.
So she already kind of understood the familial.
She knew what we were getting into, even though, I took a 50% pay cut the first year.
Yeah,
right.
It can be tough.
We had to make that up, but it paid off in the end.
Yeah.
Did you work with Brian prior to, like, in the private EMS side?
No, so I was working like in the Metro West area for Chalk Ambulance.
Okay.
When I started, way back, and eventually we were all bought out, and we worked for the same company in the end,
Yeah.
AMR.
Yep. Very cool.
And then the sun set on them around here.
Yeah.
I think they're still doing okay.
Yeah,
somewhere.
I would say so.
Yeah, they have a lot of stuff.
I think they're the largest ambulance company in the country still, right?
Yeah, I believe anyhow. So, how long were you a private or just a firefighter, right?
There's no such thing as just a firefighter.
No, but how long
was a
were you?
private
Yeah, private. So
for
that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
5
private.
years.
Yeah. So a private for
Plus,
5 years.
Might have been 6 years. I
6
got on
years.
in the end of '97,
Okay.
2004. So
Right.
yeah, a little over 6 years.
Right. And then, how did you go through the rest of your career? How many years were you as a lieutenant, captain?
I was a lieutenant for 6 years, captain for a little over 4 years.
Right.
So 2015, I made deputy chief.
Okay.
So you guys, Brockton, your captains are still on a company.
Yes.
So you did the
Very
first
similar to-
16-ish years
Yeah.
on company, which is
Most of
awesome.
the time was company officer on a ladder company. I was a ladder guy.
Right.
I did some brief stints on engine companies. Totally like a fish out of water.
Yeah.
I-
That'd be me in a ladder company. So
Not that I enjoyed having the nozzle or whatever, getting into a fire, but I also saw it as a leash.
Right.
Right.
We're a ladder company, a little more freedom when you're in the building,
Yeah.
or
Yep.
on top of the building.
Right.
That's
right.
fair.
Right. Just kind of let the animal out of the cage a little
Yeah,
bit.
absolutely.
That was your style. Yeah, that's cool. That's good. And then so the remainder of your career as a deputy chief. So you're essentially you run the shift as a deputy chief.
Right.
Over in Brockton.
In Brockton, when you first make deputy chief, and I know this is different than a lot of departments, you go to an administrative position,
Okay.
typically.
Right.
The junior deputy chiefs are running the training division, the fire prevention division, and now was the signal fire alarm division, but I know that Chief Nardelli's made a change there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
I ran the fire prevention division for almost 5 years,
Okay.
which
Very cool.
involved also the fire investigations.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it.
I think one of the things that's really people for me, I place a huge value in is that ability to promote through ranks and stay on company. Which I don't know how Soden is, but I know in my previous job, you were only really in company, private lieutenant, and then captains ran the shift. So it was one of those if you want to promote, if you have aspirations to promote or whatever, you'd be good for it. Giving up that riding the piece and huge value, at least for me, is being able to stay in
remain
company.
operational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big leap in a department like Brockton to decide to take that deputy chief's test, because typically that there's 2 to 5 years that you're going to be assigned to the
Yeah.
desk.
Right.
In an office. Yeah.
Right.
So
similar to
how
us.
long? How long was it when you were on the desk till you got back on a company?
So almost 5 years.
It was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
All right.
Yeah, and I guess that's the downside. Yeah, same thing for us. You could get promoted. There aren't enough staff positions that you definitely do, but you could end up, going to training or somewhere
Fire
else. Which is,
prevention,
you need people in all of those, but having the ability to come back out at some point is huge.
And that fire prevention position was the last place I wanted to go to.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm so happy I did it, because the education that I got there really helped as an incident commander.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel like it makes you more
Having-
well-rounded.
Having fires in some of the buildings that we were trying to shut down.
Right.
So I had intimate knowledge of these buildings and what was wrong with them, and
Yeah.
how to keep my firefighters safe.
Yeah.
In these
I was gonna say
buildings.
benefits you, but also benefits the guys that are going into those, dangerous buildings. So that's awesome.
That's
I
huge.
think it's sometimes those experiences that we don't, assignments that we don't necessarily want, like going to the office. I think everyone here is, like a type A where you want to be in the street with the guys doing, going to
Mm-hmm.
fires. But as you said, as you get higher, like having that operational, hindsight and oversight of understanding how all the pieces work, I think is probably beneficial. As much as I wouldn't want to be in an office, I know I'd probably learn a thing or two somewhere.
You could take it as oh, this sucks, or you could take it and learn from it. It's all up to you, I think.
I'm learning from it,
Yeah.
but this sucks.
Yeah. While it
Good
sucks.
days and bad days.
Yeah.
The fire investigations were great. As part of apprehending a serial arsonist.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
pretty
awesome.
cool.
Something that was pretty cool.
Yep.
And
That
then
is
there
cool.
were days where I'd be standing in front of a Ricoh copier, not being able to get the thing to work, or staple. Going, if I went back and told the kid that sat down at the Weymouth High School that was taking the entrance exam that he was going to be wondering about staples. Would he complete the exam?
Yeah.
That type
Right.
of stuff.
Was the officer like, can I have my stapler?
Yeah.
Gotta burn the
Just
bell.
swing lines.
I've been told I can play
Yeah.
music from a reasonable volume.
Oh man. So, man, now what was my next question? I had one until we started joking around.
That's how it usually goes with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll find that we get off. We have offshoots and
All valuable.
yeah.
Yeah. It's good for the
The
Barry,
blooper- the
I just want to
blooper at the
highlight
end
that
of the day.
Barry's drinking an energy drink, so just stand by for
Same.
chaos.
Yeah. So all right. So and so you retired due to health reasons,
Yes.
right? So you had a few things come up. So I know you're gonna. So Joe has an entire presentation ready for us, and for those of you who haven't had it, at your fire station or at your company, it's an entire presentation put together by Detect Together, and Joe was pretty instrumental in developing it. But really quickly, if you can, before we get into the presentation, I know you might talk about it again throughout the presentation, but if you can kind of give us, the last few years of your career and how things shaped up for you and the process that you kind of went through, and then, into your eventual retirement.
Mhm. So back in 2015, I went to a healthcare screening that was being offered for first. It was actually for police and fire, for first responders, by Heart Fit for Duty, an organization that came from Arizona to do screenings in Massachusetts. And
Right.
PFFM was working with them. Brockton Local 144 was working with them, and I was at the time like 40 pounds lighter than my heaviest weight. I was in pretty good shape. I was one of the guys that would organize, teams to go to road races and things like that. We were doing competitive stair climbs, really trying to raise the awareness of the benefits of being in good health in the Brockton Fire Department. So when this screening was offered, it was actually at the Stoughton Fire Station. I went. Being a chief officer, I tried to make sure everybody knew I was going to go, like trying to lead by example. Like, we should do this.
As leaders do, right?
Yeah.
And I was happy to see when I walked in, there was a bunch of Brockton guys sitting at the table
Right.
in Freeman Street. And they busted my balls a little bit about being the healthy guy at a healthcare screening. What are you doing here? That
Right.
type of stuff. Anyway, they walked out. Most of them didn't really find much, but there was a high index of suspicion that I had prostate cancer after the screening. So followed up with that. We'll probably talk a little bit more about that later, but I did get a diagnosis of prostate cancer in the spring of 2016
Okay.
and had the prostate removed. So I was able to go back to work for a little over 5 years after that, but having your prostate removed causes a lot of adverse side effects that you have to deal with later in life that make staying on the job difficult. So and I had also made a promise to myself that if anything else had come up in my health, that I'd have to evaluate how long I was going to stay on this job.
Right.
And unfortunately had to make that decision that it was time for me to leave.
Right. And so you started putting in your papers for retirement. What was it? So it was
September of
it 21?
21.
Yeah,
I
21.
believe.
Yeah, so very, very recently retired.
Yeah. So the retirement went through June
Yeah.
of 2022.
Right.
Wow.
And so I think Joe is a clear figure of the guy who retires from the fire service, but never really retires from the fire service, right?
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of people that care about this job
Yeah.
never really
Yeah.
retire.
Well, I think it just highlights, for you, like you might not be occupying that formal leadership position anymore, but now you're still leading informally and helping the fire service and still leading us. So
Well, that's what I hope to do.
yeah,
It might-
no.
And not that I'm far removed from the fire service. My son is still in the Brockton Fire Department. My younger brother is a deputy chief in the Brockton Fire Department. Happened to step into my role when I left. So
Awesome.
I left my guys in good hands.
Yeah.
yeah, good.
It's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I just want to say for the audience that this is going to be a little bit different of an episode than we usually shoot, where we actually are having a class being put on by Mr. Marchetti here, and it's important because the information in there is super
Invaluable.
important. Yeah.
I'm really happy because I wasn't able to take the class. I wasn't working that day, so I'm going to benefit a lot from this.
Joe, really quickly, I think it's an important thing. We talked about on the phone about how you kind of had some real key elements in how you're presenting this, and I think it's an important thing for people to understand because and all the training that we do with interdepartment training, whether police and fire, whether you're on a big scene like some of the ones that we've had the last couple of days, this interagency operation, one of the biggest key things is terminology, and I'll let you kind of take it away with that and how you were kind of like key in developing this program and so with some of the ideas that you had.
So Detect Together started at their name was the 1540 Connection. The goal of the organization was to decrease the cancer death rates between the ages of 15 and 40. And they started coming into the firehouses. They came into Brockton, and they did a program that wasn't really specifically geared towards firefighters. And what a hard bunch we can be. When they send
the
somebody
easiest
in,
crowd.
say,
Yeah.
you're getting 1 hour of OEMS credit for this, and you sit down, you sit through the half-hour class, whatever it is, and make sure you sign the roster. That's the most important part.
Mm-hmm.
And we leave, and hopefully we get some benefit out of it. But Detect Together realized this. They realized that their program they were giving to the general public wasn't really what the firefighters
Aligned.
needed.
Yeah.
They wanted to get through the firefighters. They needed to find a way to do it. So rather than just scrap it, they spent a lot of time, money, and effort to reach out to firefighters like myself and put together the program that we have now and have it relatable to firefighters, using common terminology, things like that. We're not going to show it today, but we have a video in there from Dr. Michael Hamrock, who was a Boston firefighter that became a physician, went to medical school while he was working as a firefighter. If you guys,
As most do, yeah.
yeah,
in their free
we
time.
talked about
yeah.
So we talked about the ages for prescribed testing for firefighters for exams. So if you've seen that schedule that's recommended, with colonoscopy at 40, PSA at 40, he wrote that.
Wow.
And it's actually on a letter from him to your doctor, to give to your doctor. We give those out at the class also.
So Detect Together is essentially the evolution of 1540.
It is. So
Okay.
Jim Coughlin, who is the gentleman that started the organization, he started this after some cancer deaths that were very close to his family. And it was a father and a son, I think within 10 years of each other, both passed away of cancer. So having some resources that he had available to him, he said, I can make a difference with this, and actually engaged his family in starting this organization, 1540 Connection. And, it evolved. They realized, all right, we can do a lot more than just this focus group. There are a lot more avenues we can take. And this came up, just John and I were talking the other day, like I never had reached out to them and say, well, how did you decide to start training firefighters? Because most of the organizations that we hear from or we deal with were born in the fire service or were started by someone that had a personal connection to a firefighter and there was a tragic event. That's not the case with Detect Together. This was, I actually asked the question yesterday, so I'd be prepared for this because I said, that's really interested now. How did they start training firefighters? What I was told was Jim Coughlin happened to see on a news program that the cancer rates in firefighters were growing and were astronomical. And he got his group together and said, this is someplace we can focus our efforts. So it's really organic, and it's an example of the people that we serve actually
Taking
putting
care of
something
us.
together to help us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so it's unique, not taking anything away from any of the other organizations that help us, but this one is unique the way that.
Yeah.
That's really
Very
cool.
cool.
Yeah.
Sounds like a
So,
hell of a guy.
Yeah, hats off to Jim, honestly, for doing that. And, I appreciate it. And I know all you guys appreciate it. I think I speak for everyone when I say that's a really great thing. Fortunate to have people like that in the community, people like that who are willing and able to give back and put the effort in and do so. So that's awesome. So, well, without further ado, then we're gonna jump right into it, guys. So, again, this is the Detect Together, and Joe Marchetti's, like I said, been a key factor in getting this thing, so guys like us can understand it and enjoy it and get something out of it. So
that's a big one. Guys like us can understand it.
Yeah.
Oh, that was the goal. When we were
So
putting this whole thing together.
So take it away, Joe.
So are we showing the slide? Slide
Yep.
is live now. So this is where I've already introduced Detect Together. They are based in central Massachusetts, so it's a Massachusetts organization. With the recent campaign, they've launched Response Time Matters with Jason Patton all over social media. They've now reached all 50 states.
That's awesome.
This is it's really exploding. And I learned stuff about every time I show these slides. So I didn't know the firefighter in the slide when I started showing the presentation, but now I know that he's Worcester firefighter. Every time I show the slide, there's someone else that knows something, a little bit more information about the person in this slide.
Mm-hmm.
So currently, Detect Together, when we're doing our presentations in the firehouses, it's funded by a grant from the Last Call Foundation. The Last Call Foundation was started by Kathy Crosby Bell, who is the mom of Michael Kennedy, who, along with Lieutenant Ed Walsh, Boston Fire, passed away in the Back Bay Fire in 2014 in Boston. That spurred changes in our hot works permits, welding and cutting and things like that. But also, she started this organization and gathered these vast resources towards helping firefighters in health and safety. And she's found numerous avenues where to do that now. And one of them is the cancer cause. And briefly, if you remember, when she started the foundation, I remember, because I remember seeing her on the news. And at the time, I think my son had a year on the job. And, I could relate to her, what she was going, or I could understand. I couldn't relate, but I could understand what she was going through, because it's
The anguish.
something
Yeah.
my wife would be going through, or I would be going through. Something happened to my son. And I remember her saying on the news that, how does a hose line burn through? I don't understand that. It's filled with water.
Right.
How does it burn through? So she started this foundation, and that was, like, to me, as I understand it, that was the initial goal. Like, let's create a hose line that doesn't burn through. And I remember people talking about foam impregnated hose lines, things like that. So that was 8 years ago. It's my understanding that very soon we're going to be hearing about the completion of that goal.
Really? Wow.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Can't really elaborate too much further, because they're going to
Underdeveloped.
talk about this. But can you imagine the sense of accomplishment?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Feeling that
It's coming to
8 years
fruition,
after
yeah.
losing
It's going to save
son,
lives.
Yeah.
Now you get to see this come to fruition. It's incredible.
Incredible.
Anyway, they are funding the program that I go through, and Kate McCarthy goes to firehouses and gives us education.
I was fortunate enough to meet a decent amount of their family working with the Heroes Cup, because they do a lot with the Heroes Cup here in Mass, and very good people. They also, aside from the hose, weren't they big on getting gear extractors into the firehouses? That was another one of their main missions.
Yes.
Again, like cancer prevention and
the resources that they put together are incredible.
right.
Yeah.
It's immense. So this slide here shows on the left-hand side types of cancer and their survival rates when it's caught early. So the whole purpose of Detect Together is less about cancer prevention. Obviously, the best way to deal with cancer is to prevent it, and more about detecting it early while it's still treatable. So on the left-hand side, in orange, you have types of cancer and the survival rates when they're caught early. So you look at prostate cancer, 99% survival rate when it's caught early. even lung cancer is one that I talk about a lot. 64% survival rate when it's caught early, that was kind of surprising to me. I thought of lung cancer as pretty much a death sentence.
Yeah, I kind of
Yeah, me too.
before this. If I'm being honest, I thought that was like a goner one.
So, having been in the private ambulance business, like we talked about, I used to transport people to and from a respiratory hospital in Massachusetts, and it was basically a warehouse. The only thing they didn't do was stack them on top of each other.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that stuff's scary, but that's pretty optimistic to see a 64% survival rate in lung cancer. But that lung cancer survival rate goes down to 8% when it's caught at stage 4.
It's insane.
It's horrible. And we're all paramedics. We've all worked in EMS. What is the quality of life for that 8%?
Yeah.
That survives?
Not good.
Yeah.
Probably not very good. So it's optimal. If you are going to be diagnosed with cancer, you want to make sure it's caught stage 0 or stage 1 as early as possible. And how do we do that? We do that through screenings and paying attention to our health, our baseline health. This is the firefighter cancer risk. So 1.3 times greater chance of brain cancer, 1.5 greater chance of blood cancer. This is over the general public. 2 times greater chance of testicular cancer, 1.3 times greater chance of prostate cancer, and 1.4 times greater chance of skin cancer. So brain cancer, 30% higher risk, prostate cancer, 30% higher risk, testicular cancer, 100% higher risk.
Wow.
And
I need those.
in my experience, people that I've met through my cancer diagnosis and mentoring some other cancer patients and things, cancer of the urinary system, testicular cancer, prostate cancer, bladder cancer are running rampant in the fire service, just based on my personal experience. So as firefighters, we have a greater risk of being diagnosed with cancer. The general population, 40% of them will have a cancer diagnosis. We're at a 9% greater risk of having a cancer diagnosis than the general population. We have a 14% greater risk of dying of that cancer. So Detect Together's mission is to reduce that number by basically empowering firefighters to do something when there's a change in their health. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but signs of cancer are numerous. It could be anything, and they're usually pretty subtle. It's not the crushing chest pain, that type of stuff that you seek
Subtle
medical
hints.
attention for. And on this screen, to me, the scariest number on this screen is 1 in 204 of our kids will have a cancer diagnosis. So in the general public, that's 1.7 out of 10,000.
That's terrifying.
So, and why does that happen? Because when we join the firefighter family, our families join also.
Right.
We have been exposing our kids to a lot of the same stuff we're exposed to.
Yeah, it's pretty sobering because you think, everyone here, we all take calculated risks, but you don't really think of incorporating your children in that risk calculation.
Right, and it's we need to take the precautions that are put in place now with the gear extractors, washing our gear. But do we when we get sent from one station to another? Do you put your gear in the back seat where your kids, your kids sit?
Yeah.
When they come into the station, make sure that you're cleaning the apparatus, using the exhaust mitigation systems, decrease their exposures. We don't have to eliminate them from being part of the fire department family, but we need to be smarter about that. Back when I first got on, if I was going to a class, like at the academy, the day after I worked a shift, I'd bring my gear home, the kids were playing it.
Right.
We cleaned it, but now we know that might not be enough.
Right.
It's actually the way the gear was made could be the problem. So this is a newer slide to the presentation. When I first, really became aware of the cancer problem in the fire services was with all the videos and things that Boston had put out. And there was a class that the academy was doing. It actually retired Captain Donnie Jasmine.
Oh, okay,
did
yeah.
our class
Yeah, yeah.
at the at Brockton Fire. So I thought of it kind of locally. I didn't really think of how big of an issue it was. And then I had my first diagnosis, and realized, all right, this is a national thing. I saw more firefighters that were being diagnosed with cancer. And then this slide came out, and Detect Together added it to the presentation over the summer. And this is from the World Health Organization. So the International Agency for Research on Cancer, part of the World Health Organization, classifies occupations according to their cancer risk. So in red or orange there in Group 1, they just put firefighting in Group 1. So this is worldwide recognition
Wow.
of the cancer problem of the fire service, not limited to the United States. The exposure risk for everyone. So after fighting a fire, they collect urine samples from firefighters and test them. They have 4 times the potential for DNA damage. This is damaging the chemical makeup of your body, 3 to 5 times the amount of PAH metabolites, so PAH being a category of hydrocarbons. I'm not a hazmat guy. Ethyl methyl bad shit.
Yep.
That's what I call it, right?
Yeah.
Stuff that shouldn't be in our body.
Yeah.
So 3 to 5 times the amount of PAH metabolites of naphthalene, pyrene, and I can never say the third one, penanthrene, and fluorine. So it's basically stuff that shouldn't be in our body that we're picking up at these fire scenes. And the routes of exposure is smoke inhalation and absorption. Carcinogens on the bunker gear, now we know in the bunker gear when it's made. Patients off-gassing, diesel engine exhaust. So, hopefully we're limiting that now. Most places have a Plymavent, which is a brand name, or something similar that takes the exhaust right off the piece.
Highlights. So I was talking the other day at our firehouse in Lafayette Square, Central Square, and they were talking about we're talking about the Plymavent and how far we've come in some ways. And one of the older guys, the captain of Engine 2, told us back when we had Engine 7, that firehouse, their kitchen table was literally on the apparatus bay floor. And when they would leave for calls, they'd start the truck and it's on their food.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And I was like, I couldn't believe it.
Crazy. It's just, when I talk to people who know nothing different than the Plymavent, they don't understand what was happening in the firehouse.
Right.
There was a firehouse in Framingham who, when I worked in the private ambulance company, I know that they were one of the first stations to get a Plymavent. And they steam cleaned the walls in this fire station before they installed it, and it's just black.
I can only imagine.
It's crazy. So food and drink consumed at the fire ground. So this is fairly new. You come out of a fire, grab as much water as you can because you're going to be dehydrated from wearing the gear, and working. But now we know we need to decontaminate. So we have, I call them the cancer wipes. But, we get, in Brockton, we do get the Boston Sparks come down, or Providence Canteen, and we also have them on our pieces, just wipes to wipe your hands off, wipe your mouth off before you eat or drink anything on the fire scene. And then cross-contamination at the station. So most of the departments that I've gone to delivering this class have eliminated turnout gear being brought into the living quarters. And I like to talk about how that happened in Brockton, because it's not something that was done by the department. We talk about how hard it is to affect change in the fire service. Seems to be generational sometimes. It can be done. So in Brockton, overnight, these posters showed up at entrances to the living quarters and the firehouses. It said no turnout gear beyond this point.
Yeah, we have those.
Yeah, we see those everywhere now.
So everybody stopped bringing their turnout gear upstairs. It was done by, as I understand, it was done by one person. It wasn't the department. I did this class in Brockton a few weeks ago, and I asked, has anybody seen a GO or directive from the department about bringing turnout gear up into the living quarters? And the answer was no.
Right.
So is anybody bringing turnout gear into living quarters? And the answer was no. So you can't affect change in the fire service. It can be done. It just has to make sense. I think most of the people who saw those signs said, you know what, that absolutely makes sense.
Yeah,
Why should I
yeah.
be bringing this stuff up?
Right.
This was just a few years ago that those started turning up in places, right?
Yep.
Because I remember, like when I first got on, especially like covering assignments, you'd see other departments come in and they'd be in their turnout gear and go hop in your recliner, and then
Right.
and then I know my original department, those started those exact signs started showing up, and then it was you started seeing them everywhere, and you'd go and you'd take your gear off to go and sit in there, in the station and wait.
And what I find, and in Brockton this was the case, we didn't run the ambulance. The only form of outerwear we had for on duty was our turnout coat when I first
Right.
got hired. And I do this class in other departments who run the ambulance. They usually have like an EMS parka or something like that. So it's some type of alternative. So we changed that in Brockton. I think in 2018 we bought the whole department 3-season parkas. So now we don't have to wear the turnout gear everywhere. So I was teaching the class, and so we had 16 to 20 people in each session. I did 8 sessions there. And I said, what would everybody be wearing if I did this class here 10 years ago? It was turnout coat.
Right.
Because that's where your radio was.
Right.
Nobody wanted to be without their radio. Your tools were there. And it was the only outerwear we had. So we're decreasing our exposure in that way also by finding alternative forms of outerwear that we can use.
I've tried to change the way, because even when I first started, I would be like, if it was like really cold out, I would wear my turnout coat on the EMS call.
Right.
Now I try not to do that.
I don't know if it's a universal term, but those we wear those same jackets that you guys have, and a lot of guys on shift call them jerk jackets. I don't know.
Oh, really?
I don't know if that's
Oh, like the blue denim?
No, they're basically like that same coat I was wearing, but it's it's like the bright yellow, like the safety yellow and
it
the
also
red.
meets the ANSI standards
Oh,
for
gotcha.
reflectivity.
Yeah.
Vision.
We have
So-
a lot of guys that wear those like denim with like the company patch. We call those like tough guy coats.
I like
Yeah.
those.
We used to have
Yeah,
I
the
like
job
I love
coats.
those.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
job
love those
shirts.
coats. Yeah. One of the things, and I'm sure at some point you'll get into it. It's just in getting some thoughts and things together for this episode, I started doing like a deep dive into all this stuff, and I've been well aware of PFAS and in the industry and things like that, and all these chemicals. I'm a bit of a digger. When I see something, I tend to like get into it, and I'm going to do an episode at a later date with a friend of mine who literally her whole career, she's a Harvard PhD candidate, and she's studying all these chemicals and all the effects and everything, and she's well versed in all of it. I've been on the phone with her lately, but all these chemicals, right? So like you said, they're they're carbon
Hydrocarbons.
hydrocarbons, right? Yeah. So all these chemicals, the way that they like get put out there, and they get put out there in a way almost politely, right, for us to, absorb in a sense, and they say, oh, they're like persistent chemicals, right? Or they'll call them like forever chemicals or something like that. But it almost just doesn't have like the bite or the meaning that it needs to like really make people aware.
Oh, you
And-
mean like the way they present them to you is like, oh, they're bad, but they're
Yeah, just
kind
like
of bad.
when I hear the word like, oh, they're persistent chemicals, and it's like, well, what does that mean? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, what are you talking about? They're persistent chemicals, and then you really start reading about them, and they just don't break down.
right.
And so these chemicals, and the reason why you can go into these fire stations, you can find all these things, is because they just accumulate. Call it bioaccumulation, whether it's in you, whether it's in wildlife, water, and all these things. And that's and it's not like there's like, oh, okay, we'll just eliminate this chemical. It's a class of, depending on what you're studying and what literature you're looking at, it's a class of 5,000 to 10,000 manufacturing chemicals that all basically do the same thing. So
It's crazy.
it's it's a big thing to become aware of.
Yeah.
It's a big thing to kind of digest and to really look at and try to solve the problem from a large perspective. But obviously, this is a great start. I just wanted to point that out for guys who really haven't done any. Like, we all hear, there's PFAS, yeah, but for guys who really haven't looked into it, I kind of implore you to just kind of do a little bit of a deep dive. And there's a lot of documentaries and movies and books and things like that. And we're going to do a deep dive on the show eventually, but I just kind of wanted to give
Yeah,
a little
that's important.
foreshadowing.
I
of
remember you
what's to
talking
come.
about PFAS like years ago.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
just on our snowboarding trips up in the car.
Yeah, it was funny just because that girl that I was talking about that I'm friends with, I got introduced to her through a friend of mine. We all kind of went out one day, and I asked her, I'm like, hey, like, what do you do? You know, what do you do for work? And she's like, well, and she kind of explained it to me in that sense that I was talking about earlier. And I'm like, oh, you're talking about PFAS? And she was blown away. She's like, I can't even believe you know what they are. And then so she cut to the chase. She cut out her bullshit introduction, and we like started hammering information, Yeah. And it was just funny because we kind of reiterated that conversation the other day. It was like good to catch up and talk about it. But I mean, yeah, it's an in-depth thing, and so this is a great start to highlight all of it.
So leading up to people before you have that episode, like I would recommend people read the book Exposure by Rob Belot, who's one of the attorneys that first dealt with the PFAS issue. And more commonly, what I know a lot of people have seen, it was pretty popular, the series Dope Sick on Hulu.
Yep.
OxyContin. If you've seen Dope Sick and you understand what Purdue Pharma did with OxyContin, you're going to see a lot of similarities with how PFAS was handled by the manufacturers of PFAS.
What's the name of that book?
Exposure.
We'll put that on the website.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is like an appropriate comparison, but it kind of reminds me of the movie like Erin Brockovich.
So she's actually involved in a lot of the stuff that's going on with PFAS
really?
right now.
But there you go. Nailed that one, Barry.
Nice job.
It's a good movie.
All right. So best way to deal with cancer in the fire service is to prevent it. And I think we were talking about different generations in the fire service. The prevention measures that we have available to us now are far different than what they had in the 80s and in the 70s, with extractors, exhaust mitigation systems, just the information, just being told, hey, you should wash your gear after a fire, that type of stuff, stuff that didn't happen way back when. We have the knowledge now how to prevent cancer, or the tools to do it. It doesn't eliminate the risk 100%, because you can wear that gear and your Scott pack and to the best of your abilities and meet every standard that's applicable. But as soon as you go into a smoke-filled, pressurized environment, that stuff's still getting in.
Right.
But we also know that that's when we need to take the hot showers, work out after a fire, build up a sweat, get that stuff out of your pores. There's a lot of information out there that firefighters hired in the last decade have that those hired in the previous 2 decades didn't have. So the information's there, and the tools to help prevent it are there.
I think, Rick, just one of the things you just said is really important. You're going into a pressurized environment. Like, think about putting food in a pressure cooker and, like, all the flavor gets in there. Like, a building that is on fire is pressurized, and the stuff is not just existing next to you. It's actually being pushed into you, and that's an important thing to think about when you're talking about how this stuff is entering your body.
And we're wearing that gear, and it's hot. We're hot inside. It's insulated. So it prevents heat from getting in. It also prevents heat from getting out. So
Pores are open.
With every 5-degree increase in your body temperature, your dermal absorption rate goes up 400%.
Holy cow.
Wow.
So if you think about that, in the thin-skinned areas of your groin, your neck, your armpits, that's where the stuff's being absorbed.
Right.
So if we can't prevent cancer, it's not, like I said, it's not 100%. It's not a fail-safe, any of the measures we have. Screening, catching it before it actually caused you a problem, is the next best way, right? So there are screenings available, and when they come up, take advantage of them. You have these organizations that are trying to help us help ourselves. We need to support them by submitting ourselves to the testing that they're doing. So testing before you notice symptoms. The CDC recommends screenings for 4 types of cancer, but we know there are more available now. We're going to go over one that's for prostate cancer, PSA test. So these slides here, there's 2 current screenings that are being offered to Massachusetts firefighters. I did this one last year, and it's through UMass Memorial in Worcester. You have to be a Massachusetts resident, been a firefighter for 10 years, be 40 years or older, and there's an educational requirement to it. They want you to have attended a Mass Firefighting Academy skin cancer screening or have taken the Taking Action Against Cancer class through the academy, which I believe you can do right on the LMS now.
Yep. Yeah, it is. I see it. If you're registered, just a quick aside, if you don't know what the LMS is, if you're a firefighter in Massachusetts, you can go to Department of Fire Services, Learning Management System. You have a username and ID. That's where you can find all the classes that a Massachusetts Firefighting Academy offers. And you can sign up for, I get a weekly email of available classes, and that's always on the list.
And I believe that's part of the curriculum, because I think that when we graduated, we did take this class at the very end.
The cancer awareness class.
The cancer awareness.
That was actually one of the best classes. I forget his name.
Roy.
Yeah.
Pat Roy? Or is it not
his
Pat
father
Roy.
was on
PJ
Fitchburg.
Roy.
PJ Roy. And he
Yeah.
spoke at our graduation. It was one of the most powerful messages I've received.
So in my typical presentations, we have a message from PJ Roy also.
Yeah.
And he talks about his dad. He's actually sitting on the apparatus floor talking about his dad. So after completing these requirements, the fire academy will give you a voucher, and you call, make an appointment. It's very easy. You know, the hardest part of it was the drive from. I live in Berkeley, so I'm down by Fall River. Up there. I think it took 20 minutes total once I got there.
Yeah.
In and out, did the CAT scan, got the report in a couple of days, and if you find anything that's actionable, hopefully you found it early.
Right.
Yeah. I think
I'm eligible for this in a year and a half.
No, I think
terrifying.
I was talking about, especially for, and we had talked about this a little bit before the show, is imploring younger members to go get this stuff. Like I'm not 40 yet. I hope, as soon as it's eligible, but like removing the stigma that this should be part of everyone's kind of preemptive prevention. And the biggest thing for me so far is like, it's easy for guys to be like, oh, like I'll wash my gear in the morning, or like I don't really need that exam yet. I'm like a healthy young guy. But the 1 in 204 of like, hey, am I possibly exposing my daughter to increased levels? So like if you're not doing it for you, you're not being proactive or like being worried about the stigma, like if you're not going to do it for you, like even some days with me, like, oh, like I didn't grab the Plimo vent, like, but now like knowing that, I'm like, I'm going to grab the Plimo vent.
It's a scary number. And I know we're pretty fortunate. Our union bought everyone in our department gear bags. So they're lined with the protective coating, and they're specifically for being detailed out. You can put all your gear in this bag, so when you throw it in your truck or your car, you're not having that same exposure. And I'm very guilty of not using it a lot, especially having a truck. I just throw stuff in the tailgate or in the bed. But yeah, that's that is having a kid now too. That's just a terrifying number. So
you mentioned PJ Roy. He's captain in Fitchburg Fire.
That's right. Yeah.
When I show those videos, is PJ Roy's video. He's talking about his dad, and we have another video of the wife of Lieutenant Eddie McDonough from FDNY, who passed away from colon cancer.
I watched that video.
PJ Roy's dad had squamous cell carcinomas with skin cancer. It's typically treatable, when you catch it early. But can you imagine, like you mentioned your kid, and the 1 in 204 chance that he or she has of a cancer diagnosis. I take that a step further when I do these classes. I show those videos back to back, pretty close. And I say, imagine, if you're the person that knew about these screenings, didn't take advantage of them, and you leave behind your family to make these videos.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. If that doesn't remove like the stigma, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what would.
Yeah, 100%.
So this is another screening that's available. So this is a PSA blood test. This is the what has been the gold standard for prostate cancer and prostate illness. Same requirements as the CAT scan through UMass, but when I talk about this one, your health insurance won't pay for a prostate PSA until you're 50 in your routine physical. So if you're not having any symptoms, you wait until you're 50 to get that done. The screening that I had that ended up discovering my prostate cancer, I had when I was 45. I wasn't having any symptoms. So if I had waited until my primary care physician ordered a PSA at my 50th birthday, that cancer would have grown for another 5 years, unmitigated, until it caused me symptoms.
And we were just talking before the show, Johnny, you were talking about trying to get your doctor to do some of these tests, and what he said, these aren't age appropriate, but we're seeing not only with the cancer, but high blood pressure and other things. We tend to see them on average about 10 years before the general population. A lot of that, cancer, we know a lot of the causes, but also just like the stresses of the job, waking up multiple times, sleep issues, things like that. And it's hard to fight that. And we're very fortunate for those of us that live in Massachusetts. I'm sure there are other states that have that, but living in Massachusetts, there's a huge push on this stuff. And the people in charge and the general population seem to be on board with us. So like you said, it'd be a shame to not have this available to you where other people don't, and then not take advantage of it and end up as a statistic.
Do you think in time that these numbers will go down? Like what is the earliest age that like we should be getting these exams?
Well, Dr. Hamrock, who was a Boston firefighter that became a primary care physician, actually became the Boston Fire Department physician. His recommendation is PSA at 40 years old, a colonoscopy at 40 years old. He's got some other general health recommendations that he makes also. And he's got a very good schedule that he put out there that I know Stoughton Fire has in their union contract, that those tests are covered with the copay only. And
that's amazing. Yeah.
What I would like to see is legislation.
Right.
Approving those for firefighters at the in the schedule that Dr. Hamrock.
Ultimately, it's not that this is a money issue, but when you start talking about politics and stuff, money's an issue. And ultimately, catching these things is going to be so much cheaper in the long run than paying for disabilities and cancer treatments, because all of this stuff, we are fortunate, is on the job injury here in Mass. And hopefully that alone can get people to do that.
I put in a proposal shortly before I retired to have Dr. Hamrock's schedule of testing approved for Brockton firefighters with the copay only, and that has to get negotiated, obviously. But one of the negotiating tools we have now is that in 2018, the presumption law was taken a step further. Now, if you have occupational cancer as a firefighter, you're covered under 111F benefits, so it's considered injury on duty, where it wasn't previously. So it was department by department if they covered you. If you had sick time, like I used all my own sick time when I had cancer, paid all my medical bills, all that stuff.
Wow.
Because that was before 2018. So now we're covered there. So like you alluded to, it makes sense for the municipality to want to find these things earlier, because it's going to cost them less money.
Yeah. Right. We're so fortunate in Massachusetts that we have that presumption. Like even hanging out with some of my friends in New Hampshire that are firemen, and they some of them still smoke cigars at the firehouse.
I know.
And I'll go up, they'll be like, "Hey, you want a cigar?" And I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Why not?" And I'm like, they're all a bit envious of the fact that
I've said this before. One of the biggest things the fire service did for me personally, I was a military guy, pack-a-day smoker, and getting on the job in Massachusetts, you can't use nicotine products, and wanting the job, I quit smoking. And man, if I can give back for the rest of my life for just stopping that, and now realizing how important that is, it's huge.
It's great. And a lot of people, have the reaction just like you do. No, I'll get fired if somebody sees me smoking a cigar. You have protection for the rest of your life.
It's so worth it.
All you have to do is avoid that nicotine product or
so
tobacco
worth
product.
Such an easy decision.
And you're covered for the rest of your life with a pension if you develop cancer. It's a pretty easy trade-off.
Yeah, 100%.
I'll tell you, as soon as I'm eligible to get, I'm going to do it. I mean, I hope, honestly, like we talk about this off the record a lot, or not off the record, but like off the air, of like, I hope the VA like kind of takes like a message from this book, because like as soon as I see this stuff, I think about like the burn pits that were like toxic exposures.
I hear about those.
So hopefully
and I think just sorry to get you back into it. So we go off topic a lot. I think it's important to have well-respected leaders in the fire service and from the fire service like yourself that are showing us the way, not only with having the cancer diagnosis, so having that example, and I'm guessing you're in remission, everything is going well for you right now.
Clear right now.
So great, but also even not having that exact experience, having leaders that can show us that like this is you gotta do this stuff. You know what I mean? Is really important. So just a quick
That's
like
all right.
thank
So
you for
so-
yourself and the other people that are doing this for us.
You brought that up. Let's see what the next slide is. All right. The statistics we talk about, being 9% higher than at a 9% higher risk than the general public and 14% higher risk of dying for cancer. Right? When I do these presentations, I want people to realize that those are snapshots. It's not a forecast.
Right.
You can, by taking mitigation steps now, by going to screenings, you guys have the power to bring those numbers down. As scary as they are, that 1 in 204 of our kids, now, once you've had this education, now we can start bringing that number down. Maybe if they do that study again in 10 years, we'll see lower numbers. That's
Right.
the goal. So screening, early detection, recognizing symptoms as early as possible. So what's a symptom of cancer?
Everything.
Anything, right? Random pain, loss of appetite, fatigue, headache,
Wish I had a loss.
anything, right? But typically, what it is, it's a subtle and persistent change in your health. Like I said, it's not the crushing chest pain, the piercing headache that debilitates you that you're probably going to go to the doctor for anyway. It's a subtle and persistent change. And when it lasts more than 2 weeks, that's the time to have a conversation with your physician. Not saying, run out to your doctor every time something changes, but if it hangs around, have a conversation with your doctor. And your firefighters, we're kind of the worst, right? You do wake up in the morning, do that firefighter checklist, like, okay, I opened my eyes, I'm breathing, I can drink coffee.
Everything hurts.
Everything hurts, but I can go to work.
Good
Right.
to go.
Fine.
Yeah.
Tylenol, Advil, caffeine, I'm good to go,
Yep.
right? Those are the things we need to pay attention to. We have a video in the presentation from Eric Wirtz from Boston Fire. He now works in the fire investigation unit. His started with thigh pain.
Wow.
And
Yeah, and that could be just a pulled muscle,
And he had to
Anything.
go through a number of different diagnoses and stuff like that till they got the end result and finally get definitive treatment. But if he had ignored it, he wouldn't be here anymore. He's
Right.
back on the job.
If I remember right, they sent him to physical therapy, right?
Yeah.
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 See if we can stretch the muscles out and stuff.
Yeah.
Take some Advil.
Which
And it got to the point where he just like almost couldn't walk, right? Yeah.
And-
So
I'm sorry, but nothing to like the docs that are saying, "Hey, just go to physical therapy," because I mean that's kind of a crazy presentation. I mean, but
Right.
that's the point
well,
of
and
it.
it gets back into a lot of the insurance stuff. I can't send you for an MRI until you try physical therapy and
Right.
that type of stuff. So,
Right.
But luckily he followed through with it. He was an advocate for himself and
Mm-hmm.
kept pushing and got this stuff checked out. So subtle and persistent change lasts 2 weeks or more. So this is 3 steps to tech. This is what their program was built around, this slide here. So know you're great. So, and I told Detect Together this, but when I talk to firefighters who've been on the job for any amount of time, like, when was the last time you were great? This is probably
18.
a long time ago.
Been a while.
We're sleep deprived, we're dehydrated, we're over caffeinated, we have post-traumatic stress. Some of us have post-traumatic stress disorder. So, but we get it, right? Know you're great. Know what your baseline is. Know what you
You're
typically
normal.
feel like after a busy 24-hour shift. Know what you usually feel like on your 3rd day off. When that changes, it's time to take account of that and acknowledge it and track it. So the 2-week rule, my phone's in my pocket, but everybody's got an easy tool to carry, track those 2 weeks, right? For me
Yep.
now, something changes. Right now it's like, marks on my skin or something. Hey, Siri, in 2 weeks, remind me to check this spot on my ear. Phone goes back in my pocket. Reminder comes up in 2 weeks. If that spot's gone, I'm good. If not, it goes on the list to talk to my dermatologist about, and it's as easy as that now.
That's great.
I don't feel too good. I haven't had an appetite all day. Let's see if that lasts. If that lasts for 2 weeks, time to talk to your physician.
I think that's a cool technique, and because we all know how 2 weeks, how long 2 weeks is, but what we don't do, or at least I know myself, is when you have that, all of a sudden that becomes your normal after a week, and you
Right.
kind of forget about it. Like if you're having that, like kind of just, I just feel kind of
Well, what happens
tired.
is, I feel that again. I forgot to take my Tylenol this morning.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
that's the way we usually go about it.
right. So having that, like, in 2 weeks, it's good. Hey, idiot, check this out.
Is that still there?
Yeah.
Maybe you should talk to somebody about it. So in those 2 weeks, now you've been presented with a problem, something that we need to deal with. So that 2 weeks is also used as your size up. What is the problem? How am I going to go about dealing with it?
Yeah.
What information can I collect on it? Just like we're paramedics, right? What would you ask your patient about this pain that they're having? Right.
How long has it been
PQR,
going
ST,
on?
all that
Yeah.
stuff, right? Take that information, because at the end of this size up period, you're going to have to give a report to someone, just like on a fire scene.
Yeah.
And that person's going to need information in order to act on the issue that you're having. So that's going to be your doctor. You need to give a detailed report to your doctor with as much information as you can, and that's going to help them decide where to send you from there.
No, these are great practical way, like you were saying, like it's something that like I think anyone can adopt. Like I feel like in the fire service we're so good at like accommodating, or like, so for example, I'm going to physical therapy for my shoulder because I tore my rotator cuff in 2019, and I was there and like me thinking I'm good, and I talked to my therapist last night. She's like, no, you're not. Like you've just accommodated. Like you've never actually fixed the problem. You just found ways to maneuver around it.
Yeah.
You never actually fixed your shoulder. You just
I have the exact same story. Tore mine in 2006, or it was my labrum. Exact same thing. Just learned to get along. I mean, I couldn't even put my seatbelt on.
Yeah.
My left arm, and then. But much like cancer, it did permanent damage. Like I have terrible, like scapular motion and stuff because of how I kept my arm for literally like 8 years before I finally had surgery and got it done. So
noticing
to your point, is
if you
if
notice these things don't accommodate, go get checked out.
Get checked out.
So something I see on TV now is a cable commercial where the guy steps in a bear trap. I don't know if you guys have seen that. He says, I stepped in a bear trap last week, but I'm making do. He gets into an inflatable pool and it collapses. He's trying to get on a treadmill. We all do that.
Yeah.
We all put ourselves off because firefighters more than most do that because we're the helpers. We're,
It's helping the helper.
It's hard to like feel like you're the helper when you need help, and I think that's a mentality thing that's just common in our profession, but something that you have to realize you can't help if you need help.
You can also run out of time.
Right.
Yeah, we're all minimizers. We all do it.
So if any changes in your health last longer than 2 weeks, time to call your provider. So in the during the class, I alluded to we give a handout with a letter from Dr. Hamrock. What it does is it introduces him to your physician and talks about his unique knowledge of firefighting and being a physician, and then says these are the tests that I recommend that you do for your firefighter patient.
Yep.
Another way to educate the physicians is one of these cards that we have here. It gives your doctor an idea of the cancer risk that you are faced with. We have to educate the physicians. The time to do it is now, before you need their help with the problem. It's not their fault either. They don't learn about a firefighter cancer risk in medical school.
No.
So when you go for your annual physical, you have to tell them what your family history is, and you update that every year, right? Because decades of science tell your physician that they can predict the future of your health based on what's happened to your family. Well, now it's not decades old, but recent science shows that your occupation as a firefighter is just as significant, if not more significant, than your family history.
Do you think that having that categorization with the World Health Organization is going to help us in this fight? Like, do you think that's going to be something that physicians are going to be not presented specifically with firefighters, but when you talk about this, there's data now internationally that says like, hey, this profession, and then maybe insurance companies, maybe down the line, hopefully.
I would hope, but that information is actually contained in an article that you can get if you belong to the World Health Organization. So I did have it sent to me, so that I could do some background on that slide. But that's the way it is. It's not
like a journal.
It's not like it's not New England Journal of Medicine or something like that. Yeah.
So prepare, educate your doctors now. And if your doctor's not receptive to this, might be time to find a new healthcare provider, someone that is a little more familiar with dealing with firefighters. Share any information that you have on the issue that you're presented with, and be aware, know your baseline, and pay attention to it. Back to the know your grade. Use a 2-week rule and share with your doctor. So come back to this slide here. So hopefully in the last 15, 20 minutes or so, what I've shown you is really emphasize the importance of staying on the left-hand side of this slide.
Yeah.
If you could prevent it and not be there at all, that's great. But we want to catch things early. And we know we're at an increased risk for that. We need to be vigilant and take advantage of all of the screenings that are available in order to keep us on the left-hand side.
Those are really promising numbers. You know what I mean? Like this slide is this slide and the slide with the 1 and 204 are really powerful in the like motivation to do the right thing.
Yeah.
I think.
The first cancer I was diagnosed with was prostate cancer. And it's a 99% survival rate when it's caught early. So mine was caught through a screening before I even had any problems with it. So mine was caught fairly early. But there are still issues with that. A lot of people, when they say, "Oh, what type of cancer did you have?" "Oh, I had prostate cancer." "Oh, if you're going to have a cancer, that's when you want to have." So, well,
You don't want to have any.
back up a little bit.
For surviving,
Yeah.
but not
Yeah.
necessarily for daily.
Like when I was diagnosed, I didn't know much about prostate cancer. Being a paramedic, I saw cancer patients either when they were going for treatment, doing interfacility transfers, or adverse reactions to treatment, or end of life. That's about it. So, we knew how to help them during those situations, but individual cancers I didn't have a lot of knowledge of.
Right.
It's not something that runs in my family. So getting that diagnosis, it's like getting hit by a Mack truck, because I got to go tell my family now, and they're going to have questions. I'm usually the guy with the answers.
Right.
I'm the helper.
Right.
I don't have any answers to this. So it's a very, very, very difficult situation, even though it's considered a slow-acting cancer and not really life-threatening. It's a difficult situation to handle when you get that diagnosis.
Right.
So my diagnosis, official diagnosis, was in 2016. Like I said, it was caught at a screening that was conducted by Heart Fit for Duty. They raised a high index of suspicion that I had something going on with my prostate, and that I was able to follow up on that and got the biopsy in 2016 in May. And they told me that my cancer at the time was mild. 6 weeks later, I had my prostate out at Beth Roosevelt Hospital in Boston, and my cancer had gone from mild to moderate. So they scored prostate cancer on a Gleason scale, gone from Gleason 6 to Gleason 7. So a couple of explanations for that is, one, firefighters are diagnosed with higher rates of aggressive cancers, and cancer is more aggressive than firefighters. Another explanation is that when they do the prostate biopsy, they're using straight implements to test a spherical gland. So they can only get to a certain portion of it. I'm walking out of that biopsy thinking I have mild cancer, but they can't. There's a whole portion of it that they can't see.
Right.
That have more cancer on it. So both of those explanations are pretty scary. No real way to iron it down. So I had my prostate removed in July of 2016, and since then, deal with the effects of losing your prostate. For a guy in his mid-40s, those effects are not fun.
Right.
A lot of different issues that it causes. You lose one of the gatekeepers for urine control, so you got to relearn a lot of that stuff. Luckily, my family is very understanding. My wife is very supportive and helped me work through a lot of that stuff and regain a lot of the function that I lost.
Yeah. It really does come back to, like you said, families are in this fight with us. So I'm looking at these numbers. I'm like, okay, I have a 99% chance of my family having me present in their lives, or going to my daughter's wedding, or meeting my grandkids. If I stick to that versus if I do nothing, I have a 6% chance of meeting my grandchildren.
Right.
Yeah, that's huge.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy.
All right. So this is my friend, Joey Marano. Joey was a Somerville firefighter. He he and I worked together in the private ambulance company back in the 90s. And I think it was in 2018 that Joey was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And I got a call from a mutual friend who said he knew that I had gone through cancer and was prostate cancer. He wanted to see if I could reach out and help Joey because we didn't maintain communication a lot, since we stopped working together. But, we'd see each other at get-togethers for our, we do reunions and stuff like that. People we used to work with. He said, the way I was told was Joey has cancer. It's bad, and he doesn't want to do anything about it. So basically he was diagnosed at stage 4. So that was in about 2018. Joey passed away on, was it August? October 2nd, 2020. So just about a month and a half ago was the second anniversary of his passing. We had the same cancer. Joey was only 2 years older than I was. I was diagnosed, with a mild cancer initially. When it was removed, it had gone up to moderate. Joey was diagnosed with the most severe right away. Joey was one of the busiest guys that I ever knew. And like us all, most of us, the firefighters, were working second jobs. We're the coaches on the Little League fields and the soccer fields. We're taking care of families. Maybe if you have kids, maybe your spouse is working, so you're taking the kids to and from school. We're busy people, and we're the helpers. That's our function in life, is to help people. It's what we do for a profession. When your neighbors find out you're a firefighter, who do they look to for help usually? It's you. My neighbor, the kid cuts his foot. They're on my doorstep. Hey, can you help with this? That's what we do, and that's what Joey did. When we worked in the ambulance together, Joey was also a full-time police officer at Boston College.
Wow.
And he got on at Somerville Fire, I think it was in 2002. He was still a paramedic at the time, working his fire shifts. He got married. They had a family. There were 2 kids in the relationship. He's a busy guy, just like all of us, right? And he always working. Worked as much as he could because that's how we provide for our families, right? So at some point, he left Boston College Police and became a special police officer in Foxborough. So think about how many opportunities there are to work as a special cop.
A lot of details over there.
A lot of details. I did this class at Foxborough Fire. I didn't have the slide up. And before I did the slide, I wanted to make sure it was okay with Joey's family. So I had a friend, Jimmy Curtin, Stoughton Fire, reach out and make sure that it was okay that I talked about Joey, and we compared my diagnosis with Joey's diagnosis during this talk, and they were all for it. So that's why we have the slide in here. But at Foxborough Fire, when I mentioned the name, everybody knew who he was. Some of them knew because they had done a drive-by on his birthday in 2019. We couldn't really leave his house, so they did an apparatus drive by his house. But most of them knew from him doing road details and working all around Foxborough as a special police officer. So like I said, Joey was only 2 years older than me, and his cancer was caught late. But Joey didn't have the benefit of this training, this presentation from Detect Together saying, hey, every once in a while you got to slow down. When you notice a change, it's subtle. One of those changes where, your Tylenol, your ibuprofen, your caffeine is going to help you deal with it. Let's see if it hangs around for a couple of weeks and talk to your doctor. We didn't have somebody like me standing in front of him or Kate McCarthy standing in front of him and saying, it's okay to take some time out from being the helper to help yourself. And
right.
Unfortunately, some of us, when we don't take that time, we run out of time to help. We're no longer the helpers.
Hits close to home. I mean,
Yeah.
we were both at Engine 3 in 2020. I mean,
Yeah.
we do mutual aid, and Somerville does mutual aid to us all the time.
Did he lived in Foxborough?
He lived in Norfolk, I believe.
Norfolk. I feel like I remember hearing about that big drive-by. Is how I live in Rentham.
Yep.
And yeah, I'd only been on Cambridge for a couple of years at the time, but I feel like I remember, or a year at the time. I feel like I remember that.
It was pretty big.
But I didn't
There
know
was
anything.
A lot
about
of
it, but
apparatus
yeah.
in that drive-by, and Joey's just a really likable guy.
Yeah.
You know, nice person. The consummate helper. You know, he just that's what he did. He helped people, and he was funny. So anyway, unfortunately, Joey's no longer with us, but we're able to use his story, hopefully, to prevent some other people from going down that same path.
I think anytime we lose somebody in the fire service, it's important to take a lesson from their story. You know, you know, whether it's at a structure fire and what happened and how things went wrong, or it's, you know, something like this, because they continue helping, which is what they want to do by taking that lesson.
I hope so, and that's my goal by talking about Joey, and you're going to see another friend of mine a little later on. By preserving that helping nature that they had and moving it forward and continuing it. I don't want it to sound like I'm blaming them for not going to get checked, but like I said, they didn't have somebody sitting in front of them say, "Whoa, put the brakes on."
Yeah. Right.
You know. All right, so now what? We're winding down the presentation here. Use this education, share the education with others, get a doctor, or educate your doctor. You know, and if your doctor isn't receptive to the information you give them, it might be time to look for a new physician. Complete the screenings when they're available. More and more become available. Detect Together just did a skin cancer screening October 25th. It was up at Polar Park in Worcester. And that was with Dr. Candler, was part of putting that together. At that screening, they were also navigating firefighters towards healthcare providers that know how to deal with firefighters. So that's something that's coming too. We'd like to have a list of doctors that we can say, hey, if your doctor isn't receptive to this stuff, take a look and give one of these doctors a call. And check out the online learning. So Detect Together on their website and on the responsetimematters.org website offers online learning. Up in the top right-hand corner is a course similar to what we just went through, the number of slides. There's 10 other courses there. You can see the thumbnails. I think the longest one is like 11 minutes.
So all very doable.
Yeah, all very informative. You can do it right on your phone, sit at the station if you want. And, you know, the only thing it costs you is time. But maybe one of those videos is the one that empowers you to do something about your health.
Gives you time.
11 minutes gives you another 20 years with your family.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
So when I put this slide up, and most people recognize, most firefighters recognize the guy on the screens, Jason Patton. This is a new platform that Detect Together has partnered with Jason Patton to provide, and they've created a new website, responsetimematters.org. On that website, you'll see 3 videos there that Jason and his team did as far for cancer awareness and early detection. In their typical Jason Patton's videos, they're comical, make fun of the firefighters that are the subjects, you know, but they use our language, you know, but they hit home and they're eye-opening. Through responsetimematters.org, you can also get to the online learning for Detect Together. You can also request a kit for your department. We have the posters.
Yeah, right there.
We can throw those up digitally too.
Yeah. So if you want to just kind of explain, Joe, what comes in this kit, you can open it up. You can show it to whatever you want to do with it.
So what they did was they put together these kits, educational posters and awareness posters. Hit that mic every single time.
You want to?
And you know they consulted a lot of us firefighters before making these.
Yeah, we can hold them up if you want, so the camera.
Yeah, I'm just trying to flip through to get one. So, you know, they use firehouse language. So, grab yourself by the balls, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
give yourself a check every once in a while.
Yeah.
Maybe you catch something. If you're not you're a first responder, not a last responder. That implies that, we wait too long to take care of things in our own lives.
Yeah.
We need to jump on this stuff. So that's an example of the what's in the kit that you can get.
Even just hanging those in a couple of the stations,
And
Well,
that's the idea, yeah.
There's one about checking your poop, a couple of coffee mugs in each kit.
Yeah.
So you can request that kit, contact Detect Together to schedule training. You can have someone like myself or one of the other trainers come out and do this education right at your fire department.
does it cost the department anything for you to come
It's free
up?
to the department.
So it's all paid for by the grant from the Last
Right
Call
now it's paid
Foundation.
for by the
and-
Last Call Foundation.
Yeah. So if you guys are listening and you haven't had someone come out from Detect Together, we implore you. We have
Yeah.
Joe's contact info. It doesn't cost your agency anything, and you have everything to gain.
And there's Massachusetts is 1 hour of OEMS credit also.
So,
So free credit.
you're good. We'll put that up on our website and our social media as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
My last slide will actually have some contact
Okay.
information.
Okay,
also.
awesome.
Share that too.
Cool.
So one of the reasons that I'm doing this training is I made a promise to this guy, who was one of my mentors in the fire service. He was when I first got hired, he was that bigger than life, salty senior man.
Fireman's fireman.
where, out in front of everybody, I couldn't do anything right, but behind closed doors, he was the one that told me everything that I did wrong and how to fix it.
Right.
And made sure that I knew that he was watching out for me the whole time. When I first got hired, this was Ray Roberts. My family would come by the fire station. He ended every conversation with my wife by saying, "Don't worry, I've got him." Then my son got on the job, who was assigned to the same shift as Ray. At my son's graduation, Ray, walked right up to my wife and said, "Don't worry, I've got him."
It's awesome.
And he looked after every one of us in that same way. Unfortunately, Ray retired, and he was diagnosed shortly after that with small cell lung cancer. So he lived about 18 months after retirement. It's not what we want to do with the pension system.
No, it's absolutely not.
But Ray was, that busy guy, always helping everybody else, always looking out for everybody else. And my last conversation with Ray was about 2 weeks before he passed. It was on the phone. And at the time, I was working with the 1540 project, helping, steer their education towards firefighting, along with some other firefighters they were consulting. And I was describing this stuff to Ray because he said, "Well, what's being done about cancer in the fire service? How do we stop people from, experiencing what's happening to me?"
Yeah.
So, there's all the prevention measures we're putting in place. There's education on that, but now there's education or presentations that are empowering firefighters to do something about their own health, like take account of these changes that happen and do something about it. And unfortunately, Ray was expressing some disappointment in himself for not having done that. And I said, "Well, Ray, you didn't have the person sitting in front of you telling you that this is how you're going to avoid
Right.
the pitfalls of a late cancer diagnosis." So he asked me if I was going to be doing the presentations. And I told him, I said, I don't know. But right now we're just trying to gear the class towards firefighters and things. And he said, "You tell those assholes to get their shit checked." Exactly the way he put it. At the time, he was talking about a Brockton Fire recruit class that I was going to go talk to. But, it's really applicable to all firefighters. And
Speaking to us all.
that's
Yeah,
from Ray,
exactly.
the salty senior man.
Yeah.
He wants you to get your shit checked.
When he tells you to do it, you do it.
Yeah,
do it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, and I will tell you guys, just from having gone through the class, and I know Will can tell you the same, that this isn't your typical class, and since you've listened through it, you kind of know now. We got the feel of the firehouse here, round table talking about this stuff, and it's the same way when Joe brings it to your department. So if you haven't had it in your department and you think that people are going to benefit from it, which they absolutely will, bring it in. It really is a round table, talk with a guy who's been there. He's done it.
Yeah.
He's walked the walk. He's talked the talk. He had a pretty long, successful career in Brockton, climbed through the ranks. He's not some guy that's talking to you from his white tower.
Right.
He's boots on the ground. He's the guy he's done all this stuff. And like I said, it's a round table conversation, and it's a good take, which if you've listened through it, you know that now. Spread this information with your friends, with your firefighters, with your brothers, your sisters, your family.
Yep.
So that we can all take action and try to nip this thing in the bud.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
we'll put some of this stuff up on our social medias, and we'll put that book on the website and steer people to where they can find this information through you guys. And just really appreciate you coming on. I really appreciate broaching a topic that's not great, and I think Johnny has.
We got I actually have a bunch of other stuff that we want to add in here. I want to take a minute here to highlight Dr. Christine Candler. I met Dr. Candler right around 5 years ago now, when the Brockton Union had her come down for a free cancer screening. It was something that she was offering and that she continues to offer. It's free of charge. She's gone to over 100 fire departments, and she is actively getting resources for us in the fire department, working with the AAD and getting other physicians like herself to come out and do these free screenings, and to help us all out. And her brother was also a firefighter. He tragically passed away from cancer, and with her expertise, she's using that as her way to help. And so here's a video of her and her brother, and we just want to make sure we highlight this for you guys.
Yeah.
My brother was a firefighter in Chelsea, Massachusetts. Peter was 37, had 2 little girls and a wife. We found out that he had stage 4 esophageal cancer, and he passed away September of 2016. When I was looking through all the literature about firefighters and cancer, I saw that melanoma was on the list, and I thought to myself that I could bring the AAD skin cancer screening to the firehouse.
Coming on to the job, a lot of people know that firefighting is dangerous, but I don't think they understand the risks as far as your health with skin cancer or other type of serious cancers that are developed through the work we do. I want to make sure I see every firefighter retire healthy and live a long, healthy retirement.
I was attending a convention, an educational conference in June of 2018, where they offered a free skin check. Dr. Candler found a spot on my back and told me to keep an eye on it and get it biopsied. And it ended up resulting in a stage 3 melanoma diagnosis. So here I am, 37 years old, stage 3. Not in a million years did I ever think I'd get cancer.
We've driven to 100 firehouses across the state of Massachusetts. We've screened 2,400 firefighters. Time is obviously very precious, but resources are also very precious. The Academy has so many resources to support you.
I was not gonna go to the dermatologist. I never would have gotten that checked. And I'd probably be dead right now if Dr. Candler did not find that spot on my back. I just had clean scans, and I am 21 months cancer-free. Dr. Candler saved my life.
On Mondays, I go to work, and then I leave and I go to a local firehouse, and I do firefighter screenings. We have the ability to do so much in terms of improving people's lives. This is a pure love of mine. This is why I went to medical school. I couldn't save my brother, but I can save firefighters, and I can save other people who have melanoma through early detection. And that alone brings me so much joy.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's a tearjerker.
Yep.
Yeah, no kidding.
Joni from Wellesley Fire there. Joni does some of the presentations like I do for Detect Together. When you talk to her, and in her video that's in most of the presentations, she says that she didn't think she was having symptoms at the time she went to the screenings, but then, when she looked back, she said, you know what, I was tired all the time before I got that diagnosis.
Right.
Wow.
And she did like most of us do, and like Detect Together is empowering people not to do, is just, the caffeine, Tylenol.
Sure.
I can get through the day.
Right.
I'll deal with tomorrow, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Take account of what your baseline is and when it changes.
Yeah.
And that's what Joni pushes now with us.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Wow.
So we had a book recommendation earlier in the show. Joe told us about the book Exposure. That book is like a big overview of chemical exposures, and that is for everyone in the world to read. Okay,
We'll put it on the shelf.
Yeah, we'll put it on the shelf, and it's about how the manufacturing companies and how all these chemicals and how they're getting into our water supply and all these other things, and so that's a big general overview of some of that stuff. But when I spoke to Joe a few weeks ago, he actually gave me another book recommendation called The Killer Show, and so I'm going to give it to you, Joe. You can kind of give everybody who hasn't read the book, give them how you recommended it to me and where it came from for you and how it helped you in your career.
So the Killer Show is a book. It's about the investigation into and the litigation of the Station nightclub fire in West Warwick, Rhode Island. It was in 2003, I believe. Mm-hmm. So I talked about earlier in the episode that when I first made Deputy Chief, I was assigned to the Fire Prevention Division. It was the Fire Prevention Bureau, somewhere I didn't want to be. There was a long-time member of the Fire Prevention Bureau that was there. He was a lieutenant at the time. I think he had been there for 15 or 16 years by the time I was assigned there. Now I'm being assigned as a boss. So he had a lot of knowledge in the world of fire prevention. He was a great resource in fire prevention. He also knew that having gone through, I think, 3 or 4 deputy chiefs by the time I got there, that none of us really wanted to be there.
Yeah. Right.
So one of the first things he did was, his name is Eddie Williams. He's actually a deputy chief, and he's in charge of the Fire Prevention Bureau now in Brockton, finally. It's a perfect job for him. He handed me a book. It was The Killer Show. And he said, you should read this as soon as possible, and we'll fill you in a little bit on what our function is here, So I did. I read it, and it totally changed my perspective on code enforcement, on building inspections, on plan review, to see the way that situation at the Station nightclub developed over years and how it was handled by fire investigators and the owners and their vendors was eye-opening. And to be able to prevent something like that from happening in my own jurisdiction was huge. And now I had that right at my fingertips. I could prevent things like that by.
Yeah. I feel like people often think that like with these mass casualty or like mass fatality incidents that they're like, oh, far away departments, or this happened a long time ago. Like Station Nightclub 1 wasn't far away and 2 wasn't that long ago.
Right.
Right.
So, and it's interesting you say that. I'm probably 150 pages into the book now, and even earlier on in the book, and I actually think that they might even start the book with it and then allude back to it later, but there was some sort of incident in Rhode Island, and the deputy chief of the chief had gotten on an interview with someone and basically said just that, like, that kind of thing will never happen here or something along those lines. Because 2 days earlier or 2 weeks earlier, whatever it was, there was a big fire in a nightclub in Chicago. And so I don't know the exact details of that. I was trying to rifle through the book quickly without slowing down to investigate other things and turning over stones to kind of broaden my knowledge about it. But yeah, so it was like one of those things where like that popped up, and it was almost like,
Dude, it can happen like anywhere at any time. Like I remember We got called to, this was probably like 2 or 3 years ago. We got called to a medical. I think you had left. There was a group of college kids having a house party like in the basement, and it was like all open, exposed, heavy timber, and they had like sparklers down. Like it was like, and there was 1 point of entry, 1 point of egress.
Yeah.
There was like a DJ down there, and the bulkhead was locked from the outside, and like we immediately shut it down. But I'm like, this can happen like anywhere.
Yeah.
And these kids are drunk. They have like sparklers, and there's open, exposed timber wiring. I'm like,
Yeah.
there's like 200 kids down there.
Yeah.
I mean, you see it all the time. We have all these codes and stuff, and you go in and they're doors that are supposed to be closed or open, and they're locked, or whatever, vice versa, the opposite way they're supposed to be, and 100%.
So one of the big things, like you talked about code enforcement and stuff, and so what I can talk about from what I understand of the book so far was that when this nightclub had changed hands, and it changed hands so many times, these owners were coming up with like, new ways of trying to, mitigate like the issues they were having with their neighbors, sound control, things like that. So one of the big things was there was an inward swinging door, which the fire department had gone in and said, remove this door or replace it with an outward swinging door. And then as soon as they left, they rehung the door, right? That was a problem for egress. There wasn't enough points of egress really, but the big thing too was the new owners who bought it. They decided to buy this open cell foam, and hang it on the walls, right? And that was what they used for noise mitigation. And then their other policy was that the back door, which was actually an exit, was no one was allowed to exit through that door. And so what we had talked about earlier was like basically that bouncer in court and at some of the like the gatherings and things that they had, this people like recognize this guy as a person who prevented them from leaving an exit during a fire.
Yes, for the band only.
Yeah, band only, and like the band's guests and stuff like that. So literally stood in the way of an exit door. Thinking that they're going to have the situation under control when they literally had gasoline hung on the walls, right? And so,
Crazy.
And so you see the change over these buildings and how people cut up the buildings, make their own walls, make their own, and they do all these things. And I mean,
so why I recommend that book is a couple of reasons. Is one, like you just alluded to, people change these buildings. So an inspection by the Fire Prevention Bureau, whoever does your inspections, is a snapshot.
Mm-hmm.
They go back and change the door as the inspector's walking out of the building.
Exactly.
They can do that, right? They hang up foam right after we leave. Once they get their occupancy permit signed, they're done, in their eyes anyway. But who goes into those buildings on a more regular basis? It's the guys on the apparatus, the people on the pieces, on the ambulance, doing medical calls. Reading a book like this will really emphasize the importance of paying attention to that stuff while you're on a medical call.
Right.
You look at building construction and stuff like that, but when you see an exit door without panic hardware or something, it's not always the most convenient thing to have to go back and report something to fire prevention or whoever does your inspections, but with the lives you could save.
Yeah, can you imagine not reporting it and then something happening and that's on you for the rest of your life?
And then not only it's the other reason, it's not only the general public that occupies that building.
Right.
As more alterations are made, as more codes violated, the likelihood of the fire service in occupying that building at some point while it's being attacked by fire gets higher.
Right.
So now those code problems are now become your problem.
Right.
And a danger to you.
Right.
Maybe there's an increased fire load due to foam or flammable liquids that are kept there that aren't supposed to be there.
Pyrotechnics.
How would you feel if you were in that building 2 weeks beforehand,
saw
that stuff, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Let's deal with this medical call and get out of here, type of thing. When now your brothers have a fire there 2 weeks later.
Right. Yeah. It also has kind of pushed me in the direction of like wanting to really kind of do a deep dive into like the fire codes and things like that, because I'll be honest, and I think there's a lot of guys out there like myself. I mean, I've been on the job now 5 years, and it's been a really fast 5 years, but I mean, we don't sit around and talk about fire code all the time.
know.
You know what I mean? It's really one of those jobs that's kind of left to like the fire prevention office and things like that. So,
Right.
I mean, I don't know all the fire
Unless you're
codes.
studying for promotion, you're really not exposed to it.
So, in what way, as a firefighter, am I going to be able to go into a building? I mean, we have some egregious errors that we can see, right? If you have, if you walk into like a Stop and Shop and they take their bales, they'll have the cardboard bales out back and they stick their bales in front of an exit. All right. Well, we all know that
Right.
you can't block these exits, right? But that's a very simple, basic thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's so many other things that we just wouldn't even consider.
Absolutely.
So
We have these. We've had a number of fires in them over the years while they were under construction, but this new construction type called 5B, where the 4 and 5 story apartment buildings are being made out of the lumber yards in
All
the
the
sky,
trusses,
which
yeah.
previously would have been ordinary construction
Right.
or fire resistant.
Right.
Now, because they are sprinkled,
right.
we can just put lumber everywhere, OSB
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
So what's important, when you're doing inspections in those buildings and just doing a walkthrough before an occupancy permit, like
Right.
making sure the pipe chases have fire retardant fire stops in them, usually a putty or something like
Right.
that.
Right.
Which, that's mitigate the fire spread if you do have a fire in there.
Right.
And that's typically allows the fire to get into an unsprinkled area if
Right.
you have those that are unprotected.
Right. Yeah. So, anyways, guys, it's a really good book so far. It's an easy read. I was just telling these guys that the first time I sat down to read the book, I was on shift, and I was able to get through 90 pages of it. And that's not because I'm a fast. That's not because I'm a fast reader. Honestly,
I'm a horribly slow
Yeah, me
reader.
too.
This book can attest.
It's
Well,
just
yeah, you're horribly slow.
this book drags you in like right away. It hooks you in with like some really good information, and they send it at you fast. And there's a lot of stories in it. There's stories about all the people that they were there and like the situations that they were in and how they happened to make it to the club that night. It's really kind of a fascinating book. So we're gonna add that to our
Two books, yeah,
bookshelf.
Exposure
Yeah.
and The Killer
Yeah.
Show.
Gonna add that to our bookshelf, and I highly recommend everybody out there start reading it. And so that's basically it from me for today.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. Join us, Chief. Really appreciate you being here, honestly. It's
Thank you
a
so
much.
lot of
Thanks a lot.
information,
Appreciate it.
a lot of benefit. I guarantee this is saving lives.
Yeah.
Obviously, you guys have seen this. So we really appreciate it, and the book recommendations as well. If you're watching this, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. Take a look at Detect Together. We're going to put this stuff up on our social media, on our website. We'll put the books up on our bookshelf.
Yeah.
And we'll see you guys in the next one.
Thank you for your service and your continued service.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
All right, guys. Job Talks out.